Hi, my name is Lynn Montgomery. I'm a partner at Wilkinson Barker Knauer in Washington, D.C., and my practice focuses on satellite regulation at the Federal Communications Commission. And I'm here to talk about small satellite regulation in 2020. Small satellite operators in the U.S. have a range of regulatory requirements that they have to meet to operate in the United States, and these are covered by a variety of federal agencies. This includes the FCC, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Department of State, and the Department of Commerce. And while small satellite operators are likely to deal with most of these agencies at some point, obtaining a satellite authorization from the FCC and complying with the FCC's rules will likely be one of the more significant regulatory hurdles for new operators. So we'll be focusing on FCC regulation today. The FCC has the authority as an independent agency to regulate the use of spectrum in the United States by non-federal entities. And these are entities who are not part of or operating on behalf of the federal government. The FCC issues licenses and authorizations for all types of operations that rely on the use of radio frequencies, including broadcast television station, wireless networks, and most importantly for us, satellites. Any non-federal satellite that will be transmitting into the United States, or any ground station that's communicating with a satellite from the United States, will require a valid FCC authorization. And failure to comply with the FCC's rules and obtaining an FCC authorization can result in enforcement actions by the FCC's Enforcement Bureau, and this includes significant financial penalties. Under FCC regulations, there are generally two broad classes of NGSO satellite systems. The first category comes under the definition of long-duration missions. This includes usually large constellations with a number of satellites on the order of hundreds to thousands. These are generally commercial projects with large amounts of capital investments backing them, and the radio frequency operations typically involve exclusive or shared use of fixed satellite service frequencies under the U.S. Table of Frequency Allocations. The existing regulatory framework for these long-duration missions are under the Part 25 of the FCC's rules, which regulate satellite interstation operations in the U.S. These rules were recently updated back in 2017 to reflect the new large constellations that are beginning to operate in the US and around the world. The second class is short duration missions, and these involve smaller satellites in size and also a smaller number of satellites contained in the constellation. Satellite operators seeking to operate short duration missions are typically either in an early startup phase or seeking to provide non-commercial service. Before August 2019, these satellites were authorized either in the experimental radio service or in the amateur satellite service. And just about a year ago, the International Bureau of the FCC created an alternative Part 25 streamlined process that can accommodate some of the commercial small satellite missions. We'll go into that in more detail. On the FCC's authorization procedures, the FCC issues licenses for both ground segment or Earth station operations and space segments, or the space stations of a satellite system. And as I just mentioned, the FCC has a variety of different options for authorizations. Commercial operations fall under Part 25 of the FCC's rules and are reviewed by the International Bureau's Satellite Division. Experimental operations fall under a different part of the rules and are reviewed by the Office of engineering and technology, and finally, the amateur operations fall under Part 97 of the rules and are reviewed by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. And figuring out which type of authorization an operator wants will depend on an assessment of the facts and what type of operations the operator seeks to provide. And this decision will have a significant impact on the application process, including factors such as the information that must be filed. For example, one of the large regular Part 25 satellite applications will require a more substantive legal and technical analysis than a streamlined Part 25 application, or even an experimental or amateur application. The protections afforded the operator differ depending on the application as well. Typically, regular Part 25 satellite operators will have more access, depending on the table of frequency allocations, to operate on a primary basis in certain frequency bands, whereas streamlined satellite applications and experimental and amateur are required to not interfere with those regular operations. And finally, one of the big differences is cost. A regular Part 25 application will run an applicant about $470,000. The streamlined satellite application is $30,000, and a new experimental application will run about $70. Under the new streamlined small satellite licensing rules, a certain class of small satellites that meet characteristics are able to apply for FCC authorization on a streamlined basis. And these rules provide an intermediate level authorization that can be useful for satellite operators who are ready to begin commercial operations, but not ready for the requirements and the cost of a full Part 25 authorization. In order to use the streamlined satellite application process, the satellite system must satisfy certain criteria. The first is, for each authorization, the system may not have more than 10 satellites. The satellites must be designed to have an in-orbit lifetime of 6 years or less. The satellites have to be relatively small and have a wet mass of 180 kilograms or less. They must be low risk from an orbital debris perspective, and this operator cannot plan to release debris during the satellite's operational life. And the small satellite system must be able to share spectrum with other operators. As I mentioned before, these satellites are given a lower application fee of $30,000 per operation. Although an operator is not limited to only 10 satellites, they can launch, they can apply for multiple authorizations for each segment of 10 satellites, and that each application will cost $30,000. Finally, all satellite operations that aren't already launched are subject to a surety bond under the FCC's rules. For streamlined applications, these operators are given a 1-year grace period from posting the surety bond. So if an operator is able to launch all of those satellites within that period of time, they will not be required to post a surety bond. In contrast, regular Part 25 authorizations are required to post a surety bond within 30 days of receiving their authorization. Next, one of the biggest issues that the FCC has been grappling with over the last couple of years, especially with the increase of large constellations and NGSO satellite systems in general, is orbital debris. The FCC has been regulating orbital debris issues since 2004, 2004 when it first issued its first order on orbital debris, and they've been looking into these issues since even before then. And the FCC regulates orbital debris for satellites operated by non-federal entities operating in the US. The focus of the FCC's rules is on safe and responsible end-of-life disposal of satellites. And the FCC's rules generally involve application stage disclosure requirements that are submitted along with all of the legal and technical information provided in an application, but they do also include some operational requirements. And the FCC recently adopted major updates to its rules that were adopted in April earlier this year to reflect the new operations in space. And these updates include incorporating the debris mitigation standards that were set by NASA in 2019, additional disclosure requirements that must be submitted with an application, and a requirement that operators take all possible steps to mitigate collision upon receipt of a conjunction warning. And the process isn't over yet. The FCC is looking into further revisions of its debris mitigation rules in an ongoing rulemaking. These comments will likely be required to be filed before the end of 2020. It depends on when that the further notice of proposed rulemaking is released in the Federal Register. So there you go for a quick overview of small satellite operations and regulations in the United States. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email's here, lmontgomery@wbklaw.com, or my colleague Christopher Bear, cbear@wbklaw.com, and please also check out the white paper that we created to go along with this presentation. Thank you.